Oops, I got the wrong one.
Oh, and progress bar is going, and we're live. Awesome. All right, welcome everybody to the user feed.
Progress bar is going, and we're live.
Oh, you do got to pause that.
Oh my goodness. All right, so we're off, and welcome to the Node.js user feedback initiative. Today we have a team meeting. We're going to be revisiting the enterprise use case. There was a request by some folks, to gather together, this enterprise advisory group, and a little bit of back and forth on the charter, how it's going, whatnot, how we align that interaction flow with the Node.js meeting model, which is to meet in the public, and you're continuing to evaluate that. One of my stated goals in getting this user feedback group was really to share my experience with end users in the enterprise, and bring that context to the TSC and ComCom, because folks on the startup end of things may not think this way, but I actually believe that the enterprise use case is underrepresented in Node.js, and that comes from the experience of having the opportunity to meet on site and go deep into some of the teams out there that are using Node.js, who don't necessarily have habits or permission to engage with the broader open source ecosystem. A lot of the enterprise expectations, especially as you get outside of technologies, is that you're using technology, you're focusing that technology on the delivery of business value, and the norms in open source is almost a challenge for enterprise users. So as much as we can build bridges and provide forums for that feedback, I think the Node.js project will grow, learn a lot, and we've already learned a lot in our engagement with end users, and we've learned a lot with our engagement with the folks in tooling, and we had a brief foray at Index, where we got to hear a little bit of one big enterprise user at Walmart, and so we've learned a lot, and we have yet to establish a cadence. So on the 27th, April 27th, we're on a bi-weekly schedule. We are scheduled to have a public feedback forum on that. So first, a call to action for everyone in user feedback and around that to reach out and engage. We need our usual representatives, not the usual people, but our representatives from the various projects inside of Node.js. So ComCom, Mike, our chairs, we have our chairs here represented. So Tierney and Michael, an explicit ask to both of you to seek out and find representatives in the community committee and the TSC. Hopefully, we can change that up and bring some diverse perspectives that are going to be representing there, beyond yourselves. You all do a great job, but one of our stated goals with user feedback is to provide that perspective. And I think you've both seen the benefit in these sessions of how useful it is to hear the perspectives. But it'd be great to have further representation. Michael Dawson, sorry, I was running my mouth, and you have
just, if you can promote me co-chair. For some reason, I
can't. Sorry about that.
Turn on video. That's all.
Yeah, you bet.
So not a big deal. That's why I didn't interrupt you.
How do I actually raise my hand? I don't know how to do this.
You can't once you're promoted to co-chair.
Okay.
Oh, interesting. Oh, that's terrible.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a little not good that way, but anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
I think otherwise you have to like when you set up the webinar, you have to turn on video for everybody to start with, and then
that's a setting you can do.
Yes.
I need to go find that setting.
I think that's the thing that makes the difference, because okay. I have had ones where people turned it on without having to promote them, I believe, anyway.
Okay, awesome. So on this issue, could you clarify for me, is this going to be a user feedback initiative thing, or is it going to be an enterprise advisory group thing? Because it seems like we're blurring that line.
Yes, that is accurate. That is accurate. So my intention is to invite everybody in the enterprise advisory group to participate in an end user session.
Okay.
The reason being is this model is working. The user feedback initiative is working. Members of the ComCom and feedback from the TSC, everybody seems to be really happy with this model. And we already have the tooling group, which is building its own momentum in being a repeated session there. So since that enterprise advisory group really hasn't had the championing and the right forum, what I want to do is test with that group. Come to this forum, and this is working for me in terms of facilitating, in terms of good use of my time. Is this model going to work? Do folks feel like they can provide and get the responses that they feel that they need as enterprise users through this mechanism?
Yeah, I think it clarifies our story too. If we have, the user feedback program and a number of different groups under that same program, it just, to me anyway, it's easier to explain to other people what's going on. So
I agree.
I agree with what Dan just said wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And it may turn out that we do end up having a more private discussion space for an enterprise user after we've gone through, built trust in the community. I'm open to exploring the right forum for the enterprise use case too. Just like we have the tooling. I don't expect them to live forever inside of the user feedback group, though will always be a forum for feedback. My hope in engaging feedback there is to find to help that group find their own space inside the Node.js project, where they can operate, where they can meet and collaborate.
Yeah, so, certainly. I think what you're saying is the core user feedback team doesn't always have to facilitate and enable the groups where we're getting feedback. I could still see those teams. So for the tooling's one a good example. Mm-hmm. If they form their own group and direction, and in fact, they have somebody who's championing and leading it, maybe it still makes sense to have them sort of listed under user feedback. Mm-hmm. But I can easily see and hope, like you do, that we'll end up with enough groups that those groups, it'll be too many groups for us to have to, to facilitate them all, and they'll become self-sustaining if we're really successful. So
right.
Yeah.
For sure. And I definitely think that's the right approach. And honestly, I definitely see that as a successful approach for multiple types of groups.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so I'm very happy with that approach, with what we're doing. So that said, I would like to ask, um, how do we go about the enterprise advisory working group repo and that, like, the proposal there? Because that's stalled for months now.
Right.
And I have gotten questions about it, and tried to follow up on it and get a status, but I haven't been able to do that. So what do we need to do with that? And how does this supersede that? I think that's the word I'm looking for. Or
Yeah.
should we? What's the status? I guess is what.
Cool.
I think shouldn't that be one of the goals out of this upcoming meeting, is to say, does that just get closed because it's replaced with this effort,
Yeah.
or not?
Okay, sounds good.
Does that make sense to you, Dan?
It does, and this leads to potentially our first private session item. We may want to ask folks that are attending that have been in the enterprise advisory group to stay on for another half an hour or so to drive this to a decision.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Right.
Yeah.
Rather than asking folks to come back or going away, what we could do is say, all right, we've gone through this public session here, we've given everybody in that enterprise advisory group visibility into how we're doing things in the user feedback initiative. I feel like it probably needs to, some private discussion, and even though this was a lot of the enterprise advisory group was done on behalf of the group, not by the group. It still seems appropriate that we would give them the the opportunity to I guess vote on that. I was trying to avoid the word vote. Come to decision on it. Build consensus is a better.
Yep, that's what I would. Yeah.
So we need to be careful over here because we landed. So what I'm raising to you guys, it's about the time. So last time we had like about an hour and 15 minutes, and usually people are aware about that. If we are my proposal, if we are more than 10 people in the beginning as an organizer, if we can get an extension for 15 or 20 minutes more and telling from the beginning, I think the people will appreciate that.
Yeah.
So the proposal, if the people are more than 10 people, probably you as a leader, you can say, let's be aware this meeting can be longer with 15 minutes.
Okay, so what I'm proposing for the private session is that it would be an extra 15 minutes, half an hour afterwards. I don't know that I think we'd be better served in the public session, just limiting ourselves. And I actually have a proposal that I posted before the meeting to try to keep our the discussion questions that we actually go through as limited as possible. That we got feedback from multiple individuals in our last session where they were really happy about the session, but they were frustrated that we didn't get to all of the topics. So one way to solve that is just to aggressively reduce the topics.
Yeah, I think, like I said in that meeting as well, time boxing and then having people elect themselves rather than going through everyone.
Okay.
Is probably a good way to do that. Just because having self-selection, people might be have more to say on one thing, like one specific topic, than another. And we want to definitely make sure we're hearing the people who have something that they really want to passionately say. And if it's more of a no, but I have a little bit of comment. I feel like people feel obligated to say something when we're going through everyone. My impression was that several people felt obligated to have some statement, and they didn't necessarily have one that they were super passionate about, but they felt obligated to fill that time. And so that's more of my concern, is making sure we cover all the subjects, and making sure we get the people we hear everyone's opinions on the things that they're passionate about, or the things that they care about most.
So, the counterpoint to that, Tierney, is you often will get the most aggressive voices. I happen to be one of them. I've learned how to power through a meeting, and I can be louder than anybody. And so I'm personally self-conscious about being able to pave over other folks in a discussion like that. And my worry is, folks may not be familiar. We have the raising hands kind of things that we could model. I'd be willing to try that. But I also do want to make sure that we do encourage some of the folks that folks have already selected, that they by participating, they believe that they have something meaningful to contribute to these sessions. And oftentimes it's from the underheard voices that you really kick off some of the most interesting discussions. Where everyone's gets into vibing on the cool thing, and get someone that kind of lobs out a contrarian viewpoint, and you really dig into that. Now, I think one example of that from the last public session was where we were able to get into the bundlers, not the bundlers, the integrators. Michael, you have an issue and a proposal around this. What is
well, we called it distribution channels.
Distribution
was the team.
Channels, right?
I never remember the name myself, to be honest.
So I think the distribution channels comes out of one of those questions that one of those comments that was kind of a side comment from that discussion, and and a whole new discovery comes out of those comments.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that is the worry in the model that I propose, is that there will be those overpowering voices. And what I've seen, and this is I'm basing a lot of this off of what I've seen in the modules discussion, which is
very, right.
Yeah,
for those who aren't following along, there are 40 some odd regular attendees, or 50 regular attendees. A huge group, and big problem. Lots of opinions.
Yeah, and so having so many people in the group, a lot of people have a lot of strong opinions, and it's a very technical issue. And the way that Miles Borens has been driving that is through the raise hand functionality in Zoom, and that does really seem to be effective, because it does allow people to kind of raise hand while passively, and not necessarily, they can choose whether they want to speak or not when they're selected. The hard part really seems to be moderating it, mediating it rather, and making sure you're hitting everyone. It seems not easy. But I do think that's, I definitely don't want to force that on this group. This should be a consensus thing, but I definitely think that would be a good kind of intermediary step, or kind of compromise, is to try that.
One thing, if we don't if we don't have an actual enough time to hear from everybody, then we're not going to hear from some people. So I'm just thinking of ways to sort of, like Tierney was saying, walk down the middle. I mean, we could ask people to raise hands, and if that works out, great. If it doesn't, I still think it's reasonable for Dan to try and pull out some of the people who aren't talking. We don't, but the flip side might be we just don't plan to go through everybody, right? Like, so for one question, maybe you pull out a few people, and on the next question, you pull out a few of the other people who haven't talked.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing I know Dan is good at, is selecting people and pulling them into discussion. And I think, like, if we recognize, like, I can, message Dan or something and say, hey, this person might not have been talking. I think they might have something valuable to say here, or they just haven't been talking at all. We should, like, reach out to them and say, hey, Raphael, what do you think? So I'm totally picking on you, Raphael. But, like, that's the type of thing that I think I'm kind of, that's the type of thing that I think we could kind of have that middle ground of, like, okay, get the voices who are active and are passionate, but also make sure we're pulling in those people who aren't necessarily engaged and making sure we're engaging them actively.
So I don't know, it's sort of like saying, here's our time box for the question. We're not going to get to everybody, so please put up your hand if you have something you want to contribute. If we get to the point where it's only the same people, I think we could say, well, wait a sec, we haven't heard from a few of the other people. If we run out of time, there's no expectation, so that we haven't left people out or anything, haven't gone through the. Does that make sense as a thing, something to try out?
Yeah. So I want to probe a little bit deeper on this discussion. If you don't have issue 52 open, I'd love you to pull up and scroll down to the agenda there.
Yep.
So. You've been through a few of the sessions. A couple of things that I consistently try to do is get everybody to introduce themselves, and that eats up a ton of time.
Yep.
It is, it is both the best thing and the worst thing at the same time.
That's why we stopped doing it in the ComCom, because there were too many people, and it took like 10 minutes to get through it.
I kind of think, though, that, like, in my mind, the model would be the first meeting of a particular group, we need to get everybody introduced.
Mm.
And, in theory, these are not one meeting, right? So the first meeting, we need to do that. Everybody gets to know each other a little bit. The next meetings, we wouldn't do that. Maybe if there's somebody new that's joined, we could say, hey, you're new to the group. Can you introduce yourselves? That would be the way I would, I think it's valuable enough that you need to do it at least once, because you got to have some context for people.
Yep.
And then on the follow-on ones, it would be like, yeah, no, we don't reintroduce ourselves. We already did that. We're doing our second meeting, so let's get directly to whatever the agenda is.
Right. So, how do folks feel about me combining that everybody introduce themselves, or especially everybody in the enterprise representatives introducing themselves together with describe your use case? Kind of do
that works for me.
Only one time where it's all the way around the group, and then from there it's opt-in.
I think that's good, because, like, their use case is part of the context of while they're participating. So it makes sense. You want to know not just, hey, it's their name. You want to know and that part. So,
yep.
Great.
Agreed. So I feel like this is something that we should codify into a document. Like, even if it's just a few bullet points, like, start as bare bones minimal as possible, just to have this down as something we can point to.
I like it.
And, like, honestly, like, I can probably pull this together from Mihai's notes, because he's probably written more than what I'm thinking about putting together. But, like, just codifying something into a document so we can have this as a reference for both this next one and the future groups that we try to do like this.
Sounds good.
That sounds like we need to upgrade the README file then.
So I don't know. We could either update it in the README or update it, have a different file. I don't particularly care which. Although if we had it in a different file, we could link it from the README.
Yeah, I figure it should just be in a different document somewhere under docs in the repo or something.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, plus one of that. I think that'll be easier for us. Kind of. the README is our overall overview for the world, and the public sessions are important, but not everything that we do, and so I think we'll be able to sort of collaborate on it, work on it, iterate on the process, in an independent document more effectively, and we can link off our README for folks that are interested in the inner workings of how we go get feedback. All right, so continuing the discussion around the topics for the discussion. I kind of took the one question that I asked the tooling team, that went a little bit deeper than describe what's going on, and took that as the second topic, what's working, and I condensed what's working, what's not, down into a single one to give folks the opportunity to go either direction, right? There was some feedback, a little bit of pushback on focusing only on the negative. Folks wanted to share their passion and excitement of what's going on, not just kibitz. That's what I've put forth as a proposal for the primary meat of our topic there. What do folks think about that?
I definitely agree. Like, for me, the first thing we want to know is, hey, what exactly that question, right? Like, there's a bunch of other things we can get in, but that should drive to what's most important to talk about in the short term. And so good for me.
Great.
Agreed.
Sorry?
I just said agreed.
Great. So, one thing that we haven't done yet in any of our sessions is sort of communicate back. Having some, ComCom or TSC messaging. There is an interesting opportunity and something that this group, could be interested in hearing if we think we can fit it in terms of time. The work of the diagnostics working group and the diagnostic summit and the prioritization of those efforts are keen points of interest for enterprise users. Do we want to try to fit in some community some feedback back out into the session, or should we reserve that for a subsequent follow-up?
I'd love to get that feedback. I don't know if it'll fit in.
Mm-hmm. I'm worried it won't.
That's my only thing. Like, I think by the time you go around the table with the first part, you're already going to ask people to stick around afterwards as well.
Right.
But what I think what we do need to do, and it was some of the things I put on the agenda for this issue, is we've got to start scheduling the next meetings for each of these groups. So, like, I could say, I could see this saying, well, okay, maybe we don't have enough time in this first one, but like, let's schedule the next one for 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out, whatever it is, and that's the focus of that one. And I only say that far out because we should probably be doing meetings with the other groups again before then.
Right.
Like, we've had the intro with 3 groups, but we really need every X we get together and like, okay, well, we met, but now what's the next step? What are the concrete actions? And I think having gotten through the first meeting where they're sort of getting to know each other and the concept, the second one would be, okay, now what do we want to try and accomplish? Let's make some concrete things. And in the enterprise one, one of the suggestions could be, well, like, let's look at the diagnostic side and we believe that that's something important to the enterprise use case. Can we get some, we'd like to validate that, get some feedback, that kind of stuff.
Great. And, enterprise users love timelines, and one thing that we could definitely benefit from is to be able to articulate when we would be able to come back with the next session. So that's probably a great thing for us to align around before we wrap today on when we could potentially reconvene that group. So I feel like with that, we can, move on. Basically, call to action to everyone here, ComCom and TSE invite members to come and participate, and everyone who's here that has contacts, Mihai Intel, Michael IBM, Tyranny Node Source, Chris IBM, Raphael, anybody enterprise that you feel like would benefit from coming, send them to this issue 52, and ask them to raise their hand to participate. I'm generally inclined to not limit numbers, just to make the invite as broad as possible, and adapt from there. I don't. It gets too preferential if we.
Agreed.
The other way around. But we have gotten feedback that 10 is going through all this discussion. 10's about a limit. So we might have to make decisions on a subsequent meeting.
I was gonna say, I think we might have to tweak our plan for doing the roundtable once. If we have 30 people, that's gonna take an hour and a half probably. Right. If we go into who they are and then their use case, that's gonna take a long time. Yeah, we're not gonna get through. We're not gonna get to a question beyond that. So we definitely need to make sure we're tweaking our set of questions for the size.
Yeah, maybe we can time box and say, we've got how much time for that, divide by the number of people, and set a timer and say, if we got 30 people and we got 30 minutes, you each got 1 minute.
Yep.
15 people, you got 2 minutes, right? So.
Yeah, I can screen share that.
Yep, that's good. There is some very simple math that we can go and do, right?
And just have say, sorry, we're gonna have to cut you off, right? Like.
Sounds good.
Great. So there's some. Let's go back to today's issue, back to 46, and go into some of these other topics, so we can begin planning follow-up sessions. And Michael Dawson has a proposal for a new user feedback group.
Yeah, yes. I'm not expecting this group to do anything until we see what the activity is on that, but yeah, we can touch base on that.
Great. So I'm going to go through the first issue. Tooling user feedback and general user feedback. Great point about the general user feedback. So let's talk about tooling and where we want to start with that.
I mean, I guess those two, it's like, yeah, what do? We had the greet meeting. We had a little bit of discussion. I almost think we need to say, okay, let's schedule the next meeting. And in that meeting, it's like together as a group form what are the priorities that we want to work on, right? Because it's a bit hard in the initial meeting to get to that point. We spent most of it talking about generalities. It's like, okay, we've now shared a bit as that group, what is the most important thing to move forward on? And, we can maybe identify a couple together and then try and assign actions to different people to take whatever those next steps are.
And I think that'd probably be a good way for us to prioritize what other working groups and teams need to get involved with, or what other working groups and teams we should invite to this meeting. Like, if diagnostics are super important to the enterprise with Node.js, which they are, and we get that feedback, cool. We'll send out an invitation to the diagnostics working group. If it turns out, we actually also really care about modules, maybe we should extend that to the modules team as well, as an example. And then if we're also really looking to hire people, please God help us, which is something I constantly hear. That's probably something that we should invite the community committee for to help. So that's
a very good point.
Prioritize.
Yeah, like it's one of the things. It's sort of like, what are the next things to work at? And I guess explicitly, like you just did, call out what other areas of the project do we need to connect you with?
Yep.
And make sure we get the conversation. Like, to be successful, where do you think you need to be better connected, and what can we do to make that happen?
And I think this group is a very good conduit for that in terms of the people who are involved and the people who like the passions of the people in this group.
So yeah, I'd love that. Challenge for us. How do we keep that context over months, right? Unless we go to a more frequent schedule, which is not out of the realm of possibility. I personally would love to see the mentorship initiative get a little bit more steam before I can consider committing to a weekly schedule for this. But I'm totally open to having other people facilitate and expanding this team so we can go do that if we can get there. It seems like an issue maybe isn't enough. Do we need, similar to what we're doing and putting down the process, do we need to begin to, capture some of those interest areas for these groups into a document where we're, keeping a public record and, beginning to, navigate through some of those key points?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Like, if we can make it concrete enough that says, here's an issue which is like, these are the next actions or next important things for this group. Not just, something outside the issue for the particular meeting. Start to build for each group a set of one or more issues that are, here are the things that we're trying to push forward.
Yeah, so I think something that might be useful is when I worked with Dan, he implemented this. It was a tool where we had a running minute stock, where every week we would just add more things to it, and so it would effectively be like a living log. And I think that would be a similar kind of thing that would be useful.
Yeah,
I know you kind of have the idea of what I'm talking about.
Right. If we gave everybody, an ongoing log where we captured what questions, a couple of the details that we could put in there, what questions we got, what actions we came out of, and just followed the log, and what we want to talk about next. That would go a long way to not only facilitating what we're planning in the future, but being a good record of what we've actually accomplished, which is currently he currently lives in issues and minutes, but doesn't have a real path to living history. That's great.
And I think we could probably create that in a directory in the repo, and then just. I think the issue is going to be getting started, and once we do and have something we can point people to, that's going to be when it gets easier. Just because kind of concept and structure might be kind of foreign to people.
Should be like a subdirectory of the meetings directory, for example.
I don't know if we should hide it that much, because people don't go 2 levels deep usually, at least in content.
Right. Yeah.
I was even going to suggest, though, like, we could have like a groups directory, and then you'd have an entry for each of the groups, but that pushes it down lower. So I don't know if that's good.
I wonder if we should just have it at the top level for each group.
Can we call like ongoing meeting minutes, something like that? Because it's an ongoing. So we cannot make it as an MD file, but you can make it as a Google Doc file.
So I think what we want to do is have it in the repo, because Google Docs aren't necessarily super easy to find, and also there's the issue of multiple people editing it, history getting lost, and kind of not having like something like Git blame there. But if we have something like a naming structure for this, like I just posted in the chat, but like toolinglog.mdn enterprise log.md, that kind of stuff at the top level, that might be a good way to do it, and just have some boilerplate at the top of that to say explain what this is, and then we can also link that from the README.
Right. Now, in terms of editing it, Like, do we need it to be? I guess the downside is the overhead of like, you need to actually land and squash that, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think I
There is also wiki features in the GitHub repo,
Yeah,
so we could
there is.
potentially use that. I know. I much prefer.
Where content goes to die, right?
I think it supports Markdown though, right? So
It
I
does.
think it gives you ability to write Markdown, just not something that you're going to have to land and as PRs, right?
Yeah, we don't want to get too complicated because people sometimes are aware about the Git, but
Yeah.
I'm more inclined to follow the path of being as obvious as possible, and Tierney's suggestion of just putting it in the top level of the repo. Right now, if you go to the repo, there's not a lot of depth. There's not, we're not competing for a lot of there's not a lot of other things going on. So, having it there be obvious, and then, organizing it. I was reading Christopher's comments about the Kanban. You're welcome to manage a Kanban board, Christopher. That's fine. Thank you for volunteering for managing and moving things across the Kanban board for us.
One thing I think we could do is just lower, like, either somewhat. I mean, it depends on who's in the group. But if one of us is participating, we can easily, like, we're just going to be adding a few bullet points, most likely, for the most part. So it shouldn't be that huge of a barrier. And I think we should just say we're not going to require a heavy-handed PR review process. Like,
that's the other thing. And you can edit it. You can edit it. Well, I don't know. Can everybody edit it through the?
Yes.
The UI.
VRs.
Yeah. So if you can do that, that is relatively light. It means that somebody has to keep up with accepting those. That's all.
Yeah.
And that's an area where GitHub exceeds the accessibility of Google Docs. It's easier and more approachable to most folks to do Docs because more folks are familiar with document editing. But in terms of accessibility, in terms of permanence, editing and PRing a Markdown file is probably the most permanent, most accessible thing that I can think of.
Yeah, I agree. And even suggesting in Google, people don't necessarily know how to use all the time. Like the suggesting and editing features in there.
Right. It sounds like, other than having to have somebody land things, I don't see too much of a downside of using the Markdown. So I'd vote we just start with that and adjust if there's problems as opposed to anything else.
Mm-hmm. And we have quite a few, more than 3 active hands on the repo.
Yep.
So I think we're at a point where landing PRs for the feedback group is not a major challenge for us.
It is nice that we'll get notifications too. So
right. So time check. We have 10 minutes. I want to make sure that Tierney had the session about values. I wanted to make sure we got we touched on general user feedback, because that's a good one that we've done, but not one that has identified deep recurring needs for follow-up.
Right.
So I don't want to lose sight of doing that, and I think we want to continue to keep that opportunity open. But we do have a couple groups now that really want to get back to it, and we have Chris here representing the tooling group. So my inclination would be to prioritize the tooling over user feedback, but I'd love to hear what other people.
Yeah, I'm a bit.
Chris commented in the chat.
I think we can't. I don't want to ignore the user, the general one, in terms of we held a meeting and we basically let it drop since then.
Yeah.
Like I can agree that perhaps if one's more active than others, we should schedule more meetings for one. But I still think we need to make sure it's not hey, we met you once and we didn't talk again. So. Yeah. Like at this point, I'd kind of propose we have the enterprise next week. as soon as the next one we can fit in should be the general one, and then the next one should be the tooling one. And at our current, I don't think we necessarily need planning ones in between even. Like, so that could be like, next week is the enterprise, then 2 weeks after that is the general, and then 2 weeks after that is the tooling one.
Yeah, I as long as we don't have any major issues, I don't necessarily see a problem with that.
I can see Dan thinking.
Yeah, I can too.
Well, one, yes, I agree that this accomplished the end of dealing with both, and I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure we have the forum for consensus around the enterprise advisory group. So we have there's a decision point that we're working together with the individuals who've been invited to the enterprise advisory group, and we've said that we're going to invite those folks for a half an hour after the user feedback session. We could give ourselves 2 hours of fun and meet a half an hour after that, or we could potentially say that the forum for ratifying that and making a decision could be in the ComCom. I would be comfortable with that.
So, I think, like, in terms of a decision, unless the enterprise participants disagree, what decision needs to take what additional decision making do we need? Like, it would be, if my feeling would be, hey, we had this discussion with the people who are involved in the enterprise group. They, for example, they think that, folding under the user feedback makes sense. So unless anybody objects, we're just going to close down that repo and move forward with that.
Yep.
And so I don't see a meeting needed for that, unless somebody says, hey, wait a sec, we have concerns. Like, just open an issue that says that's the recommendation. And in all likelihood, that just closes the issue, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And if I'm wrong and we end up with a huge discussion, well, of course we adjust as necessary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to what Dan said about moving it to the ComCom, since this is under user feedback, I don't think there's necessarily a need to move it up to the ComCom, just because one enterprise advisory group, sorry, I forgot the name, wasn't ratified. Like, it's not an actual thing, so there's nothing to de-charter, de-initiative.
Right.
And then additionally, if the user feedback group is making decisions to do work themselves, that's fine. I don't think anyone would stop the user feedback from doing that. I don't think there would be need to.
Yeah, I think it's you make it, we at CC everybody with the proposal.
Yep.
And then, I expect there won't be a huge amount of discussion, and I think that's what Tierney just said, and we can just move forward.
Yep.
Okay. Let's try it.
Yeah,
and that may give us a model for the future, because we are realistically taking on 3 to 4 major discussion groups, right? Yeah. General users, enterprise users, tooling, distributions, and I think I'm forgetting somebody.
Yeah, the distribution one, like that one is like, I'll wait till we get to that in the agenda, but I'll give you a little bit more context. I don't see that as something that we need to be as active, like the whole group needs to be active, unless we want to be. Like, I'll wait. I'll stop talking and wait till we get to that. But I agree.
I think we need to transition over to talking about that. I'm comfortable. So if we can just put dates to those sessions. So our May sessions would be on the 11th and the 25th. And so we'd have general users on May 11th. Tooling would reconvene on the 25th. We'll work asynchronously in the issues to build out those sessions, and we'll follow our public session process that we're going to begin writing down to go do this.
Yep. And then, if everything works out, maybe the enterprise one or the enterprise can be the one after, right? Like, I know we're not leaving this place to get together and talk, so we may want to squeeze in an extra meeting or something, but I think we can sort of see how that goes, right?
I'm going to want to have an internal team meeting at least on that next June 8th date.
I think from there we can start doing what Michael is proposing. Just every meeting is like a user feedback one, and then we can postpone if we need to for like if we do need to. Okay, we need to have some kind of discussion around this. That's how we could approach that. I think like we could on demand decide which ones aren't going to be public sessions.
And everybody here, that means that a lot of attention is going to have to be paid to doing the outreach, right?
Yep.
One of the most challenging things that we've had is not the prioritizing the time to come and make decisions and talk about it. It's the amount of time and outreach that it takes to go and make sure that broad invites are being conveyed and folks have a sense of what's going on.
Yeah. So yeah, I think if we set that, that here's the next 3, we can sort of also publicize all 3 of them together kind of thing.
Nice. Great.
That's good.
So Michael, 2 minutes for a little bit of context around distributions.
Yeah, so it's not actually like distributions is actually broader than what I was trying to form this group. It's basically like I've been working with Yihong on support for shared libraries within Node. And I personally feel that like being able to embed Node into your applications is an important use case, people like Electron and so forth. We're getting to the point where we'll have that in the CIs, at least to a limited extent, where it's just testing like the core Node tests. And the next major thing is to really start testing the use cases where you've done the embedding. And they're a little bit different, right? Because you want that core functionality to work, but there's also use cases that are specific to having embedded it. How do you start scripts? How do you communicate between the rest of your application and the Node runtime, stuff like that. So it seems like a good time. And there was also another issue open where some students at a university had tried extending Node because they found that when they were doing the embedding, there was things missing. It seems to me it would be a great time if we can get some people interested and involved in defining what those use cases are. Like that's what I see the modules team working on. Like here's our use cases, and from that you can drive some requirements. So what I'm hoping to get is find interest in a group of people who want to come together to sort of document those use cases and use that to drive requirements, and at least if nothing else for the testing that the Yihong's working on. So that we can cover those in the Node testing and so forth. Great. So I debated whether I should just open an issue in Node Core or in user feedback or whatever, but I just figured, Node Core, you click on the link, it says, well, what platform are you on, whatever. It just didn't give me the initial, hey, this is a great fit, because this is sort of a meta issue kind of thing. I could be wrong on this, but I figured, okay, well, user feedback, this is a perfect, it fits in terms of we're bringing a group of people to talk about a particular thing. It may not need to be something that hopefully it graduates into its own group that just works on this. And so it's almost, my ask was not that we as a whole group start driving. It's like, I'm going to start driving this under, and I opened it here. Great. If anybody's interested in coming, but I'm not going to necessarily place that expectation that, everybody does. I'm just going to try and push it. If it's successful, great. If it's not, and I don't find anybody who's interested, it won't go anywhere kind of thing.
Well, I already mentioned this as a possibility. I realistically cannot see a point where we would be able to hold a public session with these folks until the 22nd.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna. That's why I really didn't want it to be a formal thing.
Cool.
Basically, if a bunch of people show up and are interested, I was just gonna schedule a meeting on my own, outside of our regular schedule, and get them together, see what the interest was, that kind of stuff.
That's good. Yeah.
So it's sort of
ever.
Yeah, it's more of an informal as opposed to the other ones where we're being, yeah.
A little more structured. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
exactly. So I don't know, like I said, I wasn't exactly sure where it best fit, but I didn't think it was a bad thing to have it under the user feedback. And if it, depending on the interest that's shown and whatever, we can decide what to do. But I'm just happy to just push on it until.
Great.
So that was the additional context I think is useful.
Great. Well, don't let me be a limiting factor on this, and let us know how we can help support you in that. And like I said, the earliest that I think we could get it into our regular cadence of meetings is June 22nd. So if you want to schedule something before that, please do. Let us know, and we'll.
I'll likely just So I don't want to be tied to the sort of bigger groups where I'm just going to try and see what kind of interest I can get going, and I'll schedule whatever meetings that I can get people to come to, because it's something that I'm already working on with Yihong. So it's kind of a logical extension of saying, okay, let's try and see if we can get that larger feedback.
And Christopher, I would extend that to yourself as well, right? So we're beginning to see the cadence of what this team can do to do the facilitation of the tooling group, but if there's anything in the interim between these sessions that we can help facilitate, or that you want to do under the auspices of the user feedback, I would love to help make that happen. And not be. I don't want to be the gating factor. I'm the facilitator, and I'm helping make this happen. But I'm not here to slow down the process by my personal availability.
Okay. No, I haven't felt you're slowing down the process. So.
But yeah, I think it's a valid. I think the point he's making is, if you think it's useful to schedule something outside the schedule we just discussed to make things move faster, feel free to do that. And whoever of us can attend, we will. But yeah, don't make it that the process or anything slows things down artificially.
And I think that goes for probably if people are interested in other groups that we haven't necessarily discussed or thought of.
Yep.
Same thing. That goes for anyone watching or anyone watching this in some point in the near or distant future. Please don't hesitate. Because
I think my feeling is the three that we have are probably with the current team that we have in user feedback participating now. That's probably the three we're going to need to focus on for the next little while, right? Like I don't have others that. And even if I had others, I think it would dilute it a little bit too much if other people out there are watching and it's like, hey, well, wait a second, there's another one that's really important and you want to get involved and help push that. Certainly do that, but it probably these three are the ones I'm thinking we'll focus on and try and get off the ground before we start to look at other ones to ramp up as well.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to give the floor for final comments. We are 5 minutes over, so we do need to wrap up. But any final points that anyone would like to make or hasn't had the opportunity to present?
I'm just trying to figure out, do I need to, so if we're going to schedule another session, obviously I need to, kind of rally the troops there. But other than that, what is needed from me? So should I try to create a tooling log, .md or what have you? I'm not sure exactly what that should look like. I know there's some things we didn't get to in the first the first tooling feedback meeting that we would have wanted to get to. So it would be cool to write those things down somewhere. But so what? How can
I think it would be great if you took a first cut at that MD file, and even if you have cycles to put together what you think would be the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay.
Because really, our goal is to figure out what actionable things we can do, and if you have some thoughts on that already, that would be great.
Okay. I guess I don't fully understand what should go in this log file.
So let's break it down in issues and then PR. I'm happy to work with you to brainstorm on some of the components of the kind of the log file. As Tony said, this is something that I have prior art on to sort of get the cadence and share an idea of what that can look like, and then to augment that, you could create an issue around tooling topics in the repo and just capture. Here's what we talked about. Here's some of the things we didn't get to talk about. What are the other topics, and then drive folks to discuss in the issue, and then use that as your raw material to build out the log.
All right, sounds good. I'll go ahead and take care of that.
Awesome, thank you, sir. Any other items?
Call me Chris.
Chris, thanks.
So one quick thing, I'm going to be traveling to Cloud Foundry Summit next week, and I do not know if I will be able to make it. I hopefully will. I have meetings and stuff during that time that I will have to take care of. So
Is there a Node track there this year, or?
I don't know. I'm not aware.
If you don't know, then there probably isn't. I've looked and didn't see any evidence. So.
Oh, dang. Okay. Yeah.
I'm
not sure. So
do you have a
not.
talk or?
No, I don't. We're sponsoring.
Okay, because you were the only Node person I could find there this year. Last year we had a whole track, but
Okay.
So next week is mentorship. The 27th we will be meeting. Is that the session that you were?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I totally forgot that this isn't every week. So yes.
So it's 2 weeks from now. That is the enterprise one, right?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Great. Well, look forward to seeing everybody at the enterprise session and bringing that that initiative around the enterprise advisory group to a conclusion. And I'm really excited about this gauntlet that Dawson has sent us on of 3 weeks of super.
Yep.
So off we go.
Okay, great.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Talk to you guys all later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.